Jabril Robinson was murdered May 16, 2016 in Clayton County, Georgia. Officer Charlie McDaniel radioed for backup, in which Dwayne Parkins was dispatched to the scene. Once Dwayne Parkins arrived on the scene, he came in contact with my son and immediately shot him in the back of his head.
Harry Baxter Jr. was killed by Oakland police on January the 16th, 2011. He ran up the street, and the neighbors of seeing him run up both streets, and they said he was zigzagging, and they were and there was a guy chasing him and shooting at him, and he hit him in the back with a bullet, and Kerry fell to the ground.
Marquise Jones was killed by San Antonio police. On that day, I was getting ready for work, and I saw there was a shooting at Chacho's and Chalucci's around 5 in the morning. And I remember saying they need to close their restaurant down because it is always someone being killed there. There's always fights there, always this. And I see the yellow chalk tarp, and I say, Lord, bless their family. I could hear my sister crying, who is Marquise's son, saying they killed him. I remembering I could not breathe. I could not catch my breath.
Jacob Dominguez was murdered by San Jose Police Department on September 15, 2017. Officer Michael Pena, part of a covert response unit, on unmarked cars, no sirens, no lights, plainclothes officers boxed in Jacob, killing him within 20 seconds of having him contained. No de-escalation. After he was dead, they put in the canine to maul up his throat.
My name is Monty Benjamin, the mother of Javis Benjamin, who was killed by Officer Lynn Thomas of the Avondale State Police Department on January 18, 2013. Javis was not looking in the direction of Officer Thomas. He was engaging with the people in the community. Officer Thomas began to move backwards. Javis then looked in his direction. At this time, Officer Thomas then shot Javis twice, once in the heart and the other in the lower abdomen with his hands raised.
My name is Adrienne Hood, the mother of Henry Green V, who was killed by 2 plainclothes police officers here in Columbus, Ohio, June 6 of 2016. Many of the witnesses that were outside said that the officers never identified themselves. They jumped out the vehicle, all while firing at my son. My son, Henry, was shot 8 times from a total of 22 bullets that were fired at him. And he lay on the sidewalk and took his last breaths.
My name is Janet Baker. My son was heinously murdered by someone who was supposed to serve and protect him. When I wake up in the morning, my son is the first thing on my mind. When I go to bed at night, I labor. Did I do the right things? Did I make the right calls? Did I align myself with the right groups? Did I speak out for justice enough? Or did I say the wrong things? Did I somehow hinder getting justice for it?
My name is Geraldine Brown Bluford, the mother of Alan Dwayne Bluford, who was killed by Oakland Police Department officer Miguel Masso on May the 6th of 2012. Alan, who was not under arrest, not read any Miranda rights, began to leave. As he was walking away from the scene, the police officer turned off his lapel camera and began to chase Alan. Alan was running, according to witness statements, yelling, "I didn't do anything." The officer took out his weapon, shooting himself in the foot. Alan heard the gunshot and fell to the ground with hands up. According to witness statements, the police officer walked over to Alan as he was lying on the ground and shot him in his chest 3 times.
My name is Sheila Banks, the godmother and auntie of Corey Jones that was killed by Newman Roger, October 18, 2015. Police officer Newman Roger approached him, and within a few seconds or so, Corey was running for his life. He was shot at 6 times. He was hit 3 times. And boy, I tell you, our lives have never been the same.
My name is Kathy Scott Lights, the mother of Jarvis Lights, who was killed by a Georgia State Trooper on December 29, 2017. They stated that Jarvis exited his vehicle. There was no body cam or dash cam to confirm this statement. It was reported that Jarvis attempted to return back to his car when Officer Nolan attacked him from the back of his body. Jarvis came back up out of his car after he found what he was searching for with his arms raised in the air. State Trooper Nolan stated that he didn't know what that object was in Jarvis' hand, and he shot Jarvis in his right upper shoulder arm. And the object that was in Jarvis' hand was his cell phone, which was found next to his body after he had been shot on the ground, bleeding out.
Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to our Voices of Struggle and Hope, Mothers Speak Out Against Police Brutality, a series of online dialogues happening all of this week, beginning November 14th through the 18th, every day from starting at 12 noon, and then again at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. The MAPB Fellows will share their direct experiences of losing a child to police violence. Their stories are the first person truth behind the 1,000 fatal shootings that happen and documented, that are documented in America. We believe that it's far more many than that, but the ones that are documented every year in America. I am Colette Flanagan, the founder of MAPB. I will be moderating the sessions along with the co-founder, John Fullenwater, who's a longtime human rights activist and organizer in Dallas. Just to tell you a little bit about the MAPB Fellowship Legacy Program, it is a leadership development initiative operating in 10 cities. Out of hundreds of applicants, the 10 fellows that were special women that were chosen to be fellows to lead in this MAPB Legacy Program are the fellows that will be having their dialogues this week. We've had a tremendous response to the dialogues. We're happy that you're here. The fellows are women who have endured the loss of a child or a loved one through deadly police brutality. And each fellow has a track record of advocating for their martyred children or loved ones. And they have a track record of organizing for change in their hometowns and in their communities. The MAPB Fellowship Program is a key component in the continuing development of our national network that is part of families directly impacted by police violence. I founded Mothers Against Police Brutality because an officer in Dallas, Texas killed my son, my only son, Clinton Allen, was 25 years old. He's a father of twin boys, a Black father of twin boys. Clinton was unarmed the night of March the 10th, 2013, when a Dallas officer shot Clinton 7 times, 5 times in the center of his chest, once in his left raised arm, and once in the back at close range. Clinton's killing contained almost every dimension of the current crisis in policing in the United States. My son was a Black man, and a Black person is 2.5 times more likely to be shot to death by police. My son was unarmed, yet he was perceived by a fully armed white officer as a lethal threat. This officer escaped all criminal and civil accountability for killing my son. No charges, no indictment, no trial, and no damages. MAPB has 2 major initiatives that we are working on this year, excuse me, and that we are working on this year. And the first is taking this issue of police violence and extrajudicial killings to the United Nations. Our organization is working and collaborating with working groups within the United Nations at the Commissioner of High Court level, which is extremely phenomenal. I am just recently back from Geneva, participating in the United Nations 52nd Human Rights Council session. This work is important at this level because police brutality is global and it needs a global response. And then again, the fellowship program, as I just mentioned, which teaches and empowers the fellows to become leaders in the larger scope of the movement against police brutality and putting them at tables that they should be. Quite often, the families are the voices that we don't hear and that we should be hearing. They're not usually part of processes when legislation is created. And fellowship program puts these families in the center when possible. Our fellow on the panel this evening is Rosie Chavez, who is an MAPB fellow and organizer with Silicon Valley Debug. Rosie's nephew, Jacob Dominguez, was killed by San Jose police on September 15th in 2017. Our panelists joining us this evening, Sharon Watkins, who I don't think she's made it yet. Oh, there she is Sharon Watkins. She's a mother of 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. Her youngest son was killed also by San Jose police on February the 11th, 2015. She is currently employed at San Jose State University in Silicon Valley Debug as a community organizer. She is the author of Valley of the Shadow. Her book is a heartfelt account of the journey for peace after the killing of a mother's child. I have to get that book. And our next panelist is my friend and scholar, Dr. Marvin Delaney. Dr. Marvin Delaney is Associate Professor of History at Imatrus, former intern director of the Center of African American Studies and the former chair of the Department of History at the University of Texas at Arlington. He serves on the board of directors of the Texas State Historical Association and the editorial board of the Legacies, a history journal for Dallas and North Texas Central. Dr. Delaney's first book was Black Police in America, published in 1996. It is still considered the best concise history on the subject. Currently, he is completing a social and political history of African Americans in Dallas, Texas, a book that will be published by the Texas A&M University Press. Dr. Delaney is an activist scholar, most recently as a major voice in the successful movement to take down Confederate statues and icons in Dallas, Texas. Welcome you both here today. Thank you for your time, for being here. We are most appreciative. Dr. Delaney, I'll, since I'm here right in your space, I will start with you. I'm very familiar with your outstanding work and your contribution in the African American studies and your studies in Black police in America. Tell us a little bit about your work in that arena.
Sure. As you sort of mentioned, police brutality is a worldwide problem. It's also been very historical. So part of why I wrote the book, again, it's been out 20 years now. I wrote the book because in the past, African Americans in particular thought that they could solve the police brutality problem by having more African Americans assigned as police officers on police departments throughout the country. And to a certain extent, I'd say in the 1940s, 1950s, and then into the 1960s, they were right. The statistics show that police brutality went down, that African Americans did treat African American citizens better than they had ever been treated by police officers in the history of this country. And in addition, African American police officers formed police associations in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, here in Dallas, Los Angeles, San Francisco, with a sort of a social consciousness where they pushed the idea that they were members of the African American community, and as such, they were fathers, brothers, you know, and obviously sons in the African American community. So they took on this idea that since we're members of the community, we are going to protect the community, provide our brothers and sisters and sons and daughters better policing than they had typically gotten throughout the history of law enforcement in this country. So in a way, you know, I was very, how can I put it? I had this sort of vision that maybe this might be the solution to police brutality in our country. And of course, the solution to better law enforcement in general. But what has happened, and again, this is sort of a general assessment of current conditions, what has happened is that now many Black police officers are more police than they are Black. And many of them have moved out of the communities. And then again, there's nothing wrong with that. We want people to be able to live wherever they want to live. But right. By them living outside of the community and moving out, they don't identify with the African American community as I'd say Black police officers did in the past. I'm sorry for being so long-winded.
Oh, no. You're absolutely right in everything that you're saying. And I think that sometimes, you know, it takes a little bit more time to pontificate and so that, you know, people understand the significance of your studies, because it's very intricate and it can be very complicated because we expect the same. I always say with Black politicians, we treat our Black politicians like rock stars. They come to our churches, they ask for our votes, and then we ask nothing of them. And so I think your study with Black policemen was very on point, and I think that more people should read about it. We've even heard stories of Black policemen being on duty and being killed by white policemen.
Yeah. You
know, they're not, in most cases, perceived by their counterparts as blue. No. Right. And so, you know, your study is very, very, very interesting. Thank you for your contribution. And thank you for being here tonight. Our next panelist, Sharon Watkins. Thank you so much for being here today. I know you were having some issues getting on, but I think if you're on, can tell us.
Yes, I'm on now.
Oh, thank you. Hi. You can tell us a little bit about your work. First of all, you can please tell us about your son. Very sorry about your loss, losing a child to police brutality.
Right.
Tell us about your son and also about your work at Debug with Rosie.
Okay, so my son Philip was 23 years old, and he was having a mental episode. His fiance had called and said, he was thinking about suicide, and I'm like, well, what happened? Because I mean, he didn't have a history of mental illness um, that I'm aware of, but he was having an episode that day. So his fiance's mother called, and she asked them specifically. She said, he's having an episode. Don't send the police. He needs help. So they said, okay, well, we'll send a CIT officer, because there wasn't any other option other than the police, really. And within 5 minutes of them showing up, or a few minutes after they showed up, Phil was calm, and he was talking to his fiance and her mom. So when the police showed up, so he saw the police, and then he just started running towards them, and he had in his hand a pocket knife. There were two officers. I was told they were formerly part of the gang unit, and they took a look at Phil, and he was coming towards them, and he was 50 feet away from them, and they decided that they were going to shoot him because he didn't drop the pocket knife. Now, when this happened, he had a 2.5-year-old daughter that was in the car. He had been working 2 jobs because, you got his then girlfriend pregnant, and he was trying to go to school. So he already had a lot of stress and that type of thing. And while this whole thing was happening, his fiance, her mom was saying, don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot. He needs help, and and trying to talk to them. And then policemen pulled the guns on them because they needed to get back, is what they were telling them. And so they came in, and in my opinion, because you come and your guns are drawn, you're not coming to do any type of de-escalation other than you're basically there to eliminate. And and then they were saying that, well, the policemen can't listen to what other people were saying to them, and there's a whole lot of reasons and a whole lot of support for the officers. Whether or not this is a justified shooting, which what they call is if they fear for their life, then it's justified in taking your loved one's life, and that's unacceptable. And I have been working with Debug. I got to tell you first, I was very naive when this happened. I thought this was like a one-off. And then as I was getting to know the other families and meeting families through Silicon Valley Debug, I was like, what, you mean this happens all the time? Right. And so many stories were similar or the same or even worse. And I was like, this has got to stop. My granddaughter, who's now 10 years old, missed all the time with her dad. So she's going to basically
We may have lost Sharon.
Going to come out. And the point is with San Jose State, well, with San Jose policemen and probably with policemen all over the country, they know that they can kill you without accountability, without consequences. So they're going to do it. Absolutely. As opposed to if there were consequences attached to it, then maybe they would try some other way to de-escalate. Especially there are 2 of you. He has a pocket knife. That blade is about 4 inches long. A legal weapon, that blade would have to be 6 inches. Right. So, and they're 2, and that was the only strategy you had, was to take the gun out and shoot them. So this has got to stop. And we support other families that have gone through something like this. I've gone and participated in getting bills passed to try to prevent this from happening again or to another family. we've challenged the DA. We do our marching and we are challenging. We go through the information that we can get from them, and find holes and things like that. Right now, I'm participating on the board that we are, well, AB 118 passed here, and I'm not sure if you are familiar with that one, that we have non-law enforcement mobile response teams, and so I'm participating in there as a stakeholder. So we determine who gets the funding for that. But it's exhausting work. It is very tedious work, but if I am going to keep working at it as long as there's breath in my body, because saving one life is worth all the work, all the sleepless nights, all the marching, all the protesting, all the writing letters. All that is going to be worth it, because your loved one is not replaceable.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for supporting Rosie today and being here to support her on the panel. We appreciate your presence. Rosie, thank you for being here today. I know your family has just recently gone through a civil court battle on behalf of Jacob. I'd like to talk more about that and circle back to that, because I know that it was a very tumultuous time for your family, and you and your family got a chance to just witness some of the atrocities that happen in the courtroom that are not supposed to happen. You got a chance to see how unbalanced the scales are for families, and how the scales tend to tip toward law enforcement. But first, tell us about Jacob, what type of person he was and the things that he enjoyed. Just tell us a little bit about Jacob.
Okay, thank you. Jacob, I was 13 when my sister had him. So he was more like a little brother growing up with me. And then as I got married and had my own family, Jacob was part of that family with me. My sister, I helped her, I supported her in whatever his needs were. Jacob was a fun kid. He loved to do, we used to call him a little jump, always running around full of energy, totally energy. So we used to just, helping raise him was a blessing. Loved that kid. Treated him like my own. My mom, his grandmother, he was the firstborn. He was my sister's only son. She has 2 kids, but he was her only son. It was the firstborn nephew, firstborn grandson. He was everything to us. He was the glue to the family. He was the older brother to my kids, to my other nephews. So Jacob loved family. He loved to be with the family. He didn't like debates or disagreements. He liked our family to be in unity. It really bothered him when we worked. So he was somebody, as a single mom, that I could turn to when I was having problems with my boys at teenage years, that he could help me there. He literally would help me and encourage the boys to do positive. He became a father. He took that on. He was, being raised by a single mom himself, and grandma and aunties helping. Jacob was a little, like, how would I say this? He was, how was he going to do the job when he was raised by mothers and he wasn't raised by a father, right? So he did good. He did good. His kids loved him. He loved to be engaged with them. He had 2 boys. When we found out he was going to have a little girl, the last 2 are like 11 months apart. Oh my goodness. He's like, what am I going to do with a little girl? Oh my God. He just didn't know how he was going to handle that. They were inseparable. That was we call her mama girl. That was his mama girl. So Jacob was just like, he was our light for our family. He, like my mom said, our piece of puzzle is gone. Like that, there's a missing piece to our puzzle, to our family puzzle. And that was him. And it's been hard. It's been hard, but Jacob was my mom, through all this trauma, my mom's still at the cemetery every day in 5 years. every day. I mean, the trauma, I don't know what she's enduring mentally, but I feel like it's taken a real toll on our family because Jacob was that important to our family. So that's Jacob.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned the toll that it takes on a family. It destroys family when the social contract is broken and a policeman kills your child. The very institution that most of us teach our children to go to if there is a problem, if you need help. It's a level of betrayal that is so deep. It's such an egregious act of betrayal and violence. And a lot of times the families cannot come back together. I remember when Clinton was killed, his sister would go every day, and then she was sleeping at his grave, and we had to go and, and get her. But what was normal? Nobody was prepared for that, or how to act, or what to do. And when a person is killed by the police, he or she is typically portrayed in a negative way.
Definitely.
In most cases, their lives are so rewritten by the police department as a way to substantiate the killing that the victim submerges as a completely different person. Their character is assassinated and obliterated. And a mother can hardly recognize her child by the police department description and the media's portrayal of their child in the aftermath of the shooting. So it is not only do you have that pain, you also have the pain of the act of violence itself, trying to figure out what happened. At the same time, the police and the media is basically just destroying your loved one's character right in front of you. So we always want to ground our reflection in the lived experiences of families who have suffered this horrible crime, because the families are the forefront. They can tell you stories and things that happen because they've lived it. And if you haven't lived it, it's just something you can't fathom. It's just something that you can't imagine that would ever happen. One other thing I'd like for you to share with us, can you take us back, and I know this may be a little painful, but can you take us back to the day that Jacob was murdered by the police? You've already kind of touched on how impactful it was, to your family, and why you're having to stand in for Jacob's mom. And that's part of the trauma, I'm sure, that your family went through, because some mothers just can't do it. Tell us a little bit about what happened that day.
So it was on a Friday night. I remember just coming back from a big church gathering. I was going to bed. I was scrolling through Facebook, seeing that there was an officer-involved shooting. Went to sleep, but I'll read it in the morning. Jacob's wife's cousin called me at 4:30 in the morning, and kind of hung up on him. It's too early. It's late in the night. I just hung up, called back again. And I said, okay, what? And he says, did you see about the news? And I said, no. What are you talking about? He said, Jacob. And I screamed. My 10-year-old at the time was laying in the bed with me. I screamed. I jumped up. I ran down the hallway. My oldest son was living with me. He grabbed the phone from me because I was screaming. I was crying. I just couldn't take in the information he was giving me. And then I had told him, no, it's not him. It's not. I don't want to hear this unless I can't tell his mom. You can't tell his wife until we know it was him. And so he called and I called spontaneously. We called at the same time, the coroner's office. And he was able to get through, and Jacob had distinctive tattoos. And so he was able to describe those distinctive tattoos to Jacob, about Jacob. And he basically said, yes, it was Jacob. Now I remember just screaming, crying, saying, we got to go tell his mom. He was in front of the wife's house, and I said, don't go in, just wait. And he called his aunt, which was Jacob's mother-in-law, and waited till she got there. And I got in the car. My son drove me. I started calling all the family, started calling my mom, started calling my brother, everybody that I needed to call, the immediate family. And I went to his mom's work. She was working graveyard at the time. She was walking in with and I can remember her walking in with milk in her hand. I don't know why I can remember that, but, and she said, what are you doing here? And I said, Jacob. And she said, what? I said, the cops killed him. She screamed, she yelled. We drove back to her apartment, which was really not even a mile away. And I wanted to drive for her, but she wouldn't let me. And she just kept screaming and crying. And we were all ended up at her house, her apartment. The cousin had told Jacob's wife, and she was in the middle of her cul-de-sac screaming and yelling as well. We just all ended up at my sister's. And I remember just having to make all those calls to everybody, and her just going through in and out of phases of crying, and trying to go to the police department. I'm telling her, no, they're not going to tell you anything, but she did. That's a mom, she's going to do, it's her son. You can't stop her from doing what she's going to do. And I remember that day they posted, they had made a news announcement in the media that this suspect, known this, known that, known of his past, known to carry a gun, known to be a gang member, known, all this stuff. And as we're sitting there through that whole day, I don't think I slept at all that day. My family said, we need to get to the media and we need to let them know, because they hadn't said who it was. And like, okay. And then they said, I said, well, who's calling? Who's doing it? We did the calls. My cousins did the calls to the media. They actually said, my sister and his wife said, I said, well, who's talking to the media? And they're like, you are. And I'm like, this is what you want me to do. And I'm like a mess, but, and they said, yes, we can't do it. I said, okay, I got you. I have it. I got it. And I had to, tell his story and let him know he had a family. He wasn't, he wasn't what they're portraying him as. And first of all, he was a human being. He was changing his life around. He did a documentary. He did all these positive things that nobody knew. So I needed to tell his story for them. He had kids. He had been, yes, he struggled in life, but he was making a change in his life. He had kids. He was willing, So I went to the media with that. And, at first you have all the media, social media, the negative comments, gang member, this, that. But then when they heard this side of the family, they're like, oh, that's a different story, And I told my sister, we met Debug. We did a visual that night, and met some people from Debug. I met Lori, and she came out and said, hey, when you're ready, this is, coming the families, the other families in the area that have lost loved ones as well. I didn't we did fundraising. The community came through. We got one of the biggest churches in the San Jose area that we were able to really, we invited everybody to it. And my sister, again, that was a whole thing too, is can you help plan it? Can you help do this? I can't. She couldn't do it. The wife couldn't do it. It was a lot. So my grieving was put on hold, literally put on hold.
Because you had to fight.
I had to fight. I had to make, I had to keep fighting to tell his story, make sure he got a good funeral, got, remembered just the way we remembered him. And so I took that on, and I told my sister, well, I'm going to join with Debug and see how we can get support. What can we do? And I said, when you're ready, you come in, I'm just going to take this baton and do this for you and his wife. This is something she, the anger, everything was there. So I get my sister. And I said, but when you're ready, I'm just taking this on when you're ready. And, I got involved in what I was learning, and they gave us every step of the way on how to file complaints, how to file just we had so many months to file a claim. We didn't know the process. So with everybody at DBUG, they helped us through it. It was a lot of work. I got involved with bills that were passing. SB 1421 at that time was we had a right to know, and getting everything that was involved in that shooting. And I noticed that, you know what, I want to continue doing this. I want to do this. My hurt, my grieving, my pain turned into motivation to want to make changes. I don't want to see another family go through this. I don't want to see another mother struggle like my sister did, another wife, the kids. I didn't want to see that. And I wanted to be involved to help. I mean, I was already in the community doing work as a counselor, but this was a whole nother, there was this whole nother beast that I wanted to be involved in, because we're going against police,
Wow.
And so it was hard. It was hard. I remember the last day of our fundraising. I think I broke down so hard, because it was like, wow, the community support, but just like I didn't have a chance to literally grieve, like break down, cry. It was just that one day, and it was keep going, keep marching, keep going. You got to tell Jacob's story. You got to say, and from day one, we said this was excessive force. They didn't have to kill him. They thought he had no family that mattered, and his life mattered. And they really just thought, oh, they're just gonna, it's not gonna go, they're not gonna do anything. No, our thing was to always get the truth out. It was never gonna bring him back. Any settlement wasn't gonna bring him back. That money wasn't, it's not gonna bring him back. But we needed our truth out there, and we knew that the truth would be set. And like from day one, I also said, what was done in darkness will come to light. And we had our light. We had our light shine. So it's been a lot. Civil trial was hard. It was hard. I wasn't able to go into the trial because I was as a potential witness, but just we were getting reports every day. DBUG helped us create a website, and they did what we call court watching, because that's what I do with DBUG, was doing a lot of court watching.
Yeah.
So we did every day. They put everything down there, and I felt like I was in the courtroom with every update we had. And it came into our favor. They did find him liable for using excessive force and causing the death of Jacob. So it was gratifying, and it was, I felt like, okay, I got a little bit of, I could breathe a little, it was what we wanted out. I could breathe a little, because it's been fighting ever since for 5 years.
Right. But it's never enough, because Jacob should be here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Jacob should be here. They actually put his oldest son on the stand, and he did awesome job. He did an awesome job. He said he was going to be somebody. He wants to be a politician. He wants to make changes as well. He says in the stand, I remember him saying, I'm going to be somebody because of my dad. So it's just hard, because these families don't get the support with kids. We're not considered the victims. There's no support.
I call the children the forgotten victims.
There you go.
I mean, they really are. They, the stigmatism of growing up without a father or a mother. And when your school chums, the children can be cruel sometimes, find out that your father was killed by a policeman. Often we see that those children are taunted and teased, because their environment has taught them that policemen only kill bad guys. So your dad was a bad guy if he was shot by a policeman. So it's a rippling effect that goes throughout the family, and it scars not only adults but children tremendously, because they are not equipped, or should they be equipped to handle something like this, tragedy like that. Thank you for sharing that with us. I know it was difficult. I know you've told this Jacob story probably over 1,000 times, and each time
It's
it
still
is
emotional.
pulling the scab off of a sore each time. And I'm in awe of your work, and I'm glad you're an MAPB fellow, and I'm just thank you for your courage and the work that you do.
I just want to mention one thing though. After all this, it doesn't stop. I'm going to tell you that after this trial, we won. They're still trying to file motions to get it thrown out. They're still trying to file motions to have qualified immunity. I don't think it'll be that way. I'm having faith in on God that everything, and I've stood on my faith, and this is why we were able to get a civil trial. But at the same time, when I said I was able to breathe a little, my sister got served with a restraining order after 5 years. 5 years after the civil trial was, we got the win, right? They filed a restraining order on her for venting on Facebook. She doesn't even have a Facebook, but she went on her.
This was after the trial?
After winning the trial, they hit her with a restraining order. Yeah.
Was it the district attorney or?
It was the city attorney, the city of San Jose, their city attorney, and the officer, Michael Pena, who killed him, filed a restraining order on her. Now, really, you're the ones with the guns that can legally kill somebody, and you're filing a restraining order on a grieving mother venting 5 years after you've taken her son.
Optics.
Yeah, so we're fighting that now. When I thought I was taking a little bit of breather, they pull me back in. Here I am, just supporting her, and through that, trying to raise money to the same attorney that fought the civil trial is taking this on. And of course, we have to come up with money to retain him. We know we didn't have to, but I wouldn't have nobody else in there that knew the case more than he did. So we're going with him. But yeah, this is really how cowardly they've done to a hurting mother.
Isn't it amazing that when you get the policeman and Dr. Delaney, I'm gonna switch to you in a minute, but I just want to make the statement. Isn't it amazing that when you get these cops and law enforcement agencies into court with all the evidence, all of the experts that shows that this policeman was clearly wrong, even if the judge rules or a jury rules in favor of the family, instead of them taking that moment to say, we're going to do this, we're going to apologize to the family, which hardly ever happens. We're going to change this, and we're going to change the training on this. They continue to fight. It's like they need that right to kill. It's something that is embedded in their culture that makes them feel that if they don't have the right to kill, they can't do their job. And they will fight for that right under any circumstance, no matter how bad a shooting is, to be right and to be able to continue instead of correcting the issue so that another person isn't killed that way. Thank you, Rosie, for sharing your heartfelt thoughts with us. And always say that the families are the first truth, the lived experience. And so thank you for sharing that with us. And I know I'm always thinking about your family, and thank you for your courage.
Thank you.
Dr. Delaney, what in all of your studies, and I know that you have done some really deep studies on policemen and their behavior and the culture, what do you think? What do you think creates? What is the main culprit that creates this culture that makes it so hard for police departments to change?
Mhm. Well, as you said, I've looked at this. I've tried to figure this out, as a researcher, as a scholar, you want to figure out causation for things that happen over and over again and that never changes. Now, again, I typically will cite the history of how the police were trained. Well, I'm going to talk about training. Before I do that, I talk about in my research how police were literally started to control enslaved people, and of course, primarily people of color. And they were literally given the authority, almost to free reign, to violate the Fourth Amendment. And of course, the Fourth Amendment is, no search and seizure and so on. And so the police then developed with sort of this awesome power that indeed they could beat, whip, abuse, harass, kill with impunity. And in that very real sense, they were carrying out what society in let's say the 18th and 19th century wanted them to do. Then, of course, this carried over. This, of course, we're talking about people of color who were primarily enslaved, who were second-class citizens, and who literally had no rights under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So the police then developed these habits and these procedures with people of color that indeed gave them this awesome power. Now, there was attempts to counter this, obviously, toward the middle of the 20th century with training. As you know, we're here today. If we can just do more training, make the police more sensitive, less abusive, then this is all going to change. But my conclusion, based on the research, the training doesn't help either. So, in fact, I've been involved in some of the training. I've worked with police officers in Arlington, Texas, Charleston, South Carolina, Providence, Rhode Island, and of course, Fort Worth. And they always fight you, like as the young lady said here, that they need this power. They need the authority to do their jobs unrestricted and unrestrained by, shooting policies. Most departments have policies about shooting, basically, and it's pretty general across the board, that you're not supposed to shoot anybody unless your life is in danger or another civilian's life is in danger. But they literally throw all of that out of the window most of the time, as you said in the cases I've heard today, where they shoot first and ask questions later. Now, so that's sort of been the policy and procedure. Now, what I thought was going to happen, and again, thank you so much, Colette, for allowing me to be a part of this. What I thought was going to happen with Black Lives Matter was that, one, we would change training, once again, that line about training, and that indeed they would take some of the funds, because the police are the sort of the largest part of city governments in terms of funding, and that they would take some of that funding and indeed put it into people who could come out and de-escalate situations, help people who have mental problems, and begin to solve the problem. But unfortunately, that whole idea became political, and the police were able to use that to stop the reforms that were needed, and indeed which would have curtailed the shootings that were taking place across the country. So why do they shoot? There's been studies. Why do police shoot? And of course, some say, well, because they're afraid, particularly when they're confronting a person of color. Others say because they know that nothing is going to happen once they shoot somebody on the street unjustly. So once again, excuse me for being so long-winded.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, this is what we're here for. You always say when the thing of training comes up. And, you know, you've been doing this for longer than I have, but I've been in the trenches of this 8 years now, and I have digested it and slept and ate and dreamt and police brutality. And one thing that I found out in training, the reason why training is so unsuccessful and it just doesn't work is because in order to train policemen the way they should conduct themselves, you have to clean house. You have to realize that you have white supremacists that are on your force. And the FBI put a study out about that. You have some white policemen that are just racist. You have policemen that are on drugs themselves, on steroids abuse. They have mental issues. And so and they have guns.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they have guns and they have badges. So until those issues can be addressed, you know, and you cannot, in my opinion, you know, if you don't have a filter to filter out the white supremacists that have infiltrated your police department, you can't train a white supremacist not to shoot a person of color. That's like trying to train a dog to be a cat. You just absolutely cannot do it. So it goes far beyond training. There has to be legislation that penalizes, convict. When you step outside of your training, you will be held accountable by this legislation. And so that's a lot of the reasons why training it doesn't work in my opinion. But thank you so much, Dr. Delaney, for your work in this field. I've studied it. I use your statistics and your work a lot. And in fact, when we did recommendations to the UN, I think we cited one of your footnotes from one of your statistics. In that, and if John hasn't sent it to you, you should ask him for it, or I'll get it to you. Right. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I want to address Sharon now. Sharon, you've worked with a lot of families. You are an impacted family member yourself. What is in your opinion and in your experience, what is it that you think support-wise is the missing link that families are not getting, and as far as support in the aftermath of a police shooting?
Okay, I'm gonna turn on my my camera, but sometimes it messes up because I'm in the car. But anyway, I think the major thing that families are lacking is support. There's no psychological support, you know, no support for depression. There's no for the family members. There's no support for PTSD for the children. There's no support at all. We're considered to be the villains. They villainize our loved one that they killed. They villainize the whole families. When they after Phil was killed, there was some stuff on Facebook. I had to get off of Facebook because people were justifying, they were making assumptions. Well, the parents should have done this, the parents should have done that. They make assumptions that your loved one was the villain because society does not want to believe that policemen are a bunch of killers. It's just easier to believe that they shot a villain rather than they shot an innocent person. They shot somebody that shouldn't have been shot, and they don't think about the families. It's like we're just non-existent, because when it's flipped and your loved one is shot by someone other than law enforcement, there's victim support, there's psychological support, there's assistance with having services for that person. But if the police are the ones that killed your loved one, like you said earlier, they're stigmatized. And if people say, well, what did he do? You know, they ask those kind of questions. You know, you're explaining it to someone that has not been through it. And debug, does a very good job at supporting, because number one, we never get tired of hearing the story. People get tired of you talking about your loved one was killed. They don't want to hear it after a few years. They don't want to hear it. Sometimes people don't want to hear it after a few months. Sometimes people don't want to hear it at all.
Right.
And with supporting the families, we never get tired of hearing it. I never get tired of hearing somebody tell me about their loved one, what they were like or what happened that day, because you have to process it. And it's difficult. And that was like the start of when I started writing my book. I was just like, every day I would say how things would trigger me. Whenever I saw police, I'd wonder, okay, so who's going to lose their life now? Whenever I saw, when I'm at work, people, you're the subject of everybody's, you walk past and they're talking about, oh, their son got shot, and you're the sensational thing to talk about. Even at church, there were some people that would, say, oh, was he in a gang or something like that? And in my book, I come home and I said, wrote down and all my reactions. So it was over the course of like a year or two that I was writing how all that stuff affected me. And even like in your own families, sometimes people will say, oh, you're using that for an excuse. So all you have where people don't judge you, they listen, and they fight with you, or in some cases fight for you. Because like you said, some people are not ready to get out there and fight. I spent a month with my head in the closet, just crying. I admire the people that can get out like the next day or the next week. I was not one of those people.
Yeah.
It took me a long time, but Debug did not give up on me. That is one thing that I really love about that organization, because we don't get any support. I went to see a psychologist, but I'm working, I have insurance. If I didn't have that, I couldn't have done it. And my granddaughter doesn't live with me. I couldn't put her under my insurance. And I put in chat earlier, she finally admitted to me she's 10 years old, and she finally told me that she's embarrassed when people ask about her dad. And she was 2.5 when he died. I told her, just tell him that he died when you were 2. You don't have to go into details to say, oh, the police killed him. Because, well, number one, then she would be, stigmatized.
It's too much for children.
Yeah, it is. And they need to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
The city of San Jose, every city, every place that Congress needs to acknowledge that these children are affected.
Absolutely.
And it's not just go away.
Absolutely.
Because they ignore it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for your insight on that. And thank you for your tremendous work that you do every day, Sharon. It's time to wrap up, but I want to let Rosie lead us out with her thoughts on what are still some of the changes that you would like to see happen in policing.
Thank you, Colette. I think what I'd like to see, the changes in policing when there is incidents like this, whether it's an officer involved shooting, whether it's use of force. If the officer that killed my nephew had an incident that was nationwide. He beat up a couple in a hotel. It was on Good Morning America, the Today Show. He's a liability in our community. He's still policing our community. He's a sergeant, mind you. So I'd like to see that not happen. Nobody that is involved in use of force or killing of a loved one should be promoted. We should have access to some sort of, they give you the 1421, but it doesn't give you anything if he had any disciplinary action at any time in his police. I think we should have a right to know that. They're in our community and they're policing our community. We want to know, he was upset that we got to see what he looked like. Now we know what he looks like. And so we have a right to know that. Everybody has a right to know what Mike Pena looks like in our community, so that if they are approached by Mike Pena, to be on your P's and Q's, because he obviously doesn't like to be talked to a certain way. He will beat you up. He will, maybe shoot you and kill you. I'd like to see changes within our police department. I'd like to see our chief of police really listen to what we're saying as families. And we're not out here being anti-cops. We want changes because we don't want to see another family go through this. And unfortunately, you got the chief of police over there in Dallas that was over here, and he's not good. He never wanted to be on a round table with us to meet, but the chief that took over after him did meet with us. It didn't go too many places with it, but Eddie Garcia is not the best one.
That's funny. Well, not funny, but bringing that up, when he first got to Dallas, one of the first meetings that he requested was a meeting with Mothers Against Police Brutality, because he knew, that we were the gatekeepers of police brutality here, and we did not meet with him. We are going to meet with him, but I don't believe in having meetings just to have a meeting. I think that meeting will be very strategic when it does happen, and
call him on his stuff. Call him on his
cases in front of him when that does happen. Rosie, thank you for your courage. Thank you for having your panel tonight with us. We've had a tremendous response. Thank you to both of our panelists, Dr. Delaney, thank you so much. To Ms. Sharon Watkins, we are having again these panels. We have 2 more days left. Thursday and Friday. Send the link out to your families and friends. We had some UN people, United Nations people on an earlier panel today. The response has just been really great. And this is what it takes, having these dialogues, because most people only hear about victims when CNN or MSNBC makes them a national case. And we know that there are far more killings than just the same victims that we hear. And Mothers Against Police Brutality tries to uplift all of the victims because every lives matter. And in closing, I noticed that one of our staunchest, one of our greatest supporters is here on your panel today. His name is Larry Best. He's been supporting Mothers Against Police Brutality now for 7 years. When people were shaking their heads and thinking I was totally crazy in Dallas, Larry Best would drive and support, and he supports us every month, he and his family. And I just want to give a shout out to him. Thank you everyone for being a part of this. Keep up the good work. The fight is not over. It's not a sprint. It's a cross-country jog to the finish line, but we have to continue to do this work, hold policemen accountable, and just thank you everyone for all the work that you do. And your work is so important because so many people just do not take on police brutality because it is not a very rewarding. It just the rewards, the wins, they just don't come a lot. It may take 5 years to get one win, but we will stay at it. And thank you everyone for being a part of Rosie Chavez panel. You can go to our website, mothersagainstpolicebrutality.org, and read the bios on all of our amazing fellows there. Thank you again and good night.